Hi everyone, welcome back to Crochet Tutorials. In this video we're going to make this fantastic popcorn stitch rainbow square. I will mention straight up that this pattern was actually designed by an Australian designer named Celine from a website called Craftycc. I'll put a link to that website where you can actually find this written pattern in the description box of this video, but it may be helpful to actually have a video to see the technique of changing the colour and of course making the popcorn stitches all the way around while carrying your main colour with you the whole time. You know, certainly if you've never changed colour or carried another colour along with you, this is a great video to learn that basic technique. It's especially relevant in the kind of mosaic trend that's fairly big now in crochet, and it's a really good technique to know. It's not difficult, just can be a little bit tricky to get used to, but you'll master it for sure. Just want to let you have a look at some other squares that I've made in this pattern. I'm actually making this for a particular project that I'm making. I'm making a cushion out of these squares, and I have one square left to make, so that's the one I'll be making today. But these are a couple of other examples that I made of this square. You can see that obviously this one is using the black as the main colour, which just looks fantastic with the popcorn, the coloured popcorn stitches. And with this one, I've only changed colour to make the popcorn stitch once. Obviously with these, I've changed colour every round for the popcorn stitch. But of course, you can use only one colour change if you like. Of course, you can just make your square in a solid colour. So if you wanted to make it in solid white or pink or whatever colour, you don't need to change colour at all. The technique is still exactly the same, just without the colour change. So these were actually made using, well, 8-ply yarn, actually, DK yarn, for both of them. And this one is slightly bigger than this one, which is interesting because they're both 8-ply. But because of the particular way the pattern works up, you do need to go up a hook size. So normally I'd probably use a 3.5mm hook for 8-ply yarn, but I'm actually using a 4.5mm hook for this. And it tends to enable the square to sit flat. If you used a 3.5mm hook, you might find that your square kind of crinkles a little bit or curls up a little bit, and that's simply because you need to go up a hook size. So if you find that, do go up a whole hook size and you'll be fine. Your square will be flat. So grab a hook and your yarn. You will need a pair of scissors, and we'll get started making this gorgeous square. Okay, just quickly, I'm using this paint box cotton Aran. It's 100% cotton, and it comes in the most astonishingly broad range of colours. They are wonderful, obviously, to make this rainbow. I'm using the white, or actually this is light champagne, as my base colour, and then the 6 other colours for the rainbow. Essentially, I've used all the rainbow colours except the indigo. So, you know, we've got the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. So whatever colours you choose, whether you're using an Aran or a DK, doesn't really matter as long as your hook is relatively suitable, and as I said, go up one hook size for it. So for this, we start with our main colour and then bring in our next our initial colour change for the popcorn in round 2. Okay, so I have my hook and my main colour yarn. The pattern says to create a magic ring. If you don't like creating a magic ring, you can just chain 3 and crochet all your stitches into that first chain, or you could chain 3 and slip stitch into the first chain, creating a ring that way. But you will find that you end up with a hole in the center here, which isn't an enormous deal, and certainly if you prefer it that way, then do it that way. Having said that, the magic ring is a great tool for your toolkit, so this is how it's made. Lay the tail of your yarn across your 3 fingers like that, and just hang on to it, and then wrap it around your fingers so it's around the back, and then cross the working yarn across that first wrap. And then take your hook, go under the first wrap and grab the working yarn and just turn and pull up. And then you have this loop on your hook. And then grab that working yarn again and just bring it through that loop. And you'll find that this magic ring is really sturdy. It won't fall apart because we've made that additional loop. And it actually does count as a chain 1 now. So the pattern asks you to chain 3. So from here I chain 2. And then we're going to put in another double crochet, which in the UK is a treble crochet, into the ring, and then chain 1. And you can see from this one that this center block is actually made of groups of 3 stitches, and they are separated by a chain 1. So that's our first 2 stitches and our chain 1. When we come back around, we're going to put in our last stitch there. So we've chained 1, so we need to put in 3 more groups of 3 stitches separated by a chain 1. So that's 1, 2, 3, a chain 1, and another, 2 and 3, and a chain 1. So that's 2, 3 really, groups of 3 done, and then 1 more, 2 and 3, and a chain 1, and then pop in that last double crochet to complete that cluster there. And take your tail and pull on that tail to close the ring, and just slip stitch to the top of that chain that we did initially. So you can see you've got a cute little square there, and the corners are chain 1, and the corners will be chain 1 all the way throughout this square. Now, because we can turn the square for this round, but we can't for any others, because obviously we need to work all of our popcorn stitches onto only the right side of this square. Incidentally, this is what the back looks like. And because we've carried the yarn and we've hidden it underneath all these stitches, you can't see the strings of yarn going around as you carry the colour around. But we obviously can't turn the square over because everything needs to be on this side. So the way we're going to address that is that we're just going to slip stitch into the corner. So slip stitch into that next stitch, and then slip stitch into the corner, and then you're in the correct position to make your corner. So chain 3 and put in another double crochet, chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. course I lost all my loops off that hook then. Now every corner is 2 double crochets and a chain 1 in between and 2 more double crochets. So I don't think I explained that terribly well just then. 2 double crochets, a chain 1 and 2 double crochets. And then from here, we're actually going to make our first popcorn stitch. Now I'm going to be using this red for my first colour. Whatever colour you decide to use is entirely up to you. And as I said earlier, if you just want to make this square in a plain colour, just so you get the hang of how it works, you can. Otherwise, change colour. You need to add your second colour now. So you can see here, and I'll bring this as close as I can, what we've done is we've worked the corner, but then we've got 3 stitches. And the way this pattern works, every time we see 3 stitches, essentially from now on, we're going to put a double crochet in one, a popcorn stitch in the middle, and a double crochet in the next. So, and this double crochet and this double crochet will be in our main colour, but the popcorn stitch will be a different colour. So you need to kind of scooch those corner stitches over to find the place to put your first double crochet, which is the top of this stitch here. So when we change the colour, what we do is yarn over and pull through. So we've got 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through 2 of the loops. Leave the other 2 loops on the hook and bring in this next colour. And essentially we just grab the tail like this and loop it over the hook and bring it through those 2 loops. And this might be a little bit tricky when you first attach it, but we just hang on to that tail, and what you can do is pull on this loop here. You see how that loop got smaller, and that makes it a little bit neater. Hold this main colour yarn along the top of what you're working on, or along the top of your work, and that will effectively hide it when we put in this popcorn stitch. So a popcorn stitch is you yarn over, you go into the stitch and yarn over and pull up a loop. So we have 3 loops on the hook, and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then do that 4 times. So we've got 1 there, that's 2, just tug on that so it doesn't get wrapped around. This is 3, and 1 last 4 stitches. So what I like to do is just tug on the tail of that colour to make that loop just a little bit smaller. Now to complete the popcorn stitch, all of those 4 stitches go in that 1 stitch, in that middle stitch of the cluster. Then you just pull up a loop and take the hook out and insert it underneath the top of that first stitch you made in your popcorn cluster. Then put the loop back on the hook, pull it tight, and slip stitch that through that first stitch. And you can see it makes a nice little puffy stitch. Now, we actually complete a popcorn stitch by chaining 1. So we've slip stitched the stitch together, but then we need to chain 1 to complete it, and we're going to do that with our main colour. And that ensures that this loop on the hook is the correct colour for the next stitch. Just like we did here when we did our final pull through 2 on this double crochet with the red, so that loop would be the correct stitch with correct colour. We're doing it here on this stitch, and again we need to carry this yarn, this red yarn now, with us while we make these stitches. So just lay it on the top and kind of hold it there, and double crochet into the top of that third stitch. And then we've got our corner. We're at our corner. So we need to put in 2 double crochets, 2 double crochets, a chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. And then we're actually back at the beginning of a cluster of 3. And you can see there, remember that the first stitch in a cluster of 3 is going to have a double crochet in the main colour. The last stitch in the cluster of 3 is also going to have a double crochet in the main colour, but this middle stitch is going to get a popcorn stitch. Excuse me. So again, we need to just scooch that across so we can find the place to place that stitch. And into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, but then leave that there, drop your main colour yarn and pick up the other colour. And I like to pull on that so that loop gets closed a little bit, and make sure it's being held in place, and yarn over with that colour that the popcorn stitch is going to be. And that means that that loop on the hook is the correct colour for the next stitch, and that means the top of the stitch will actually be the right colour rather than the white. So I keep pulling this because sometimes it gets a little bit slack, and you just want it a little bit tighter than that. So we make 4 stitches, 4 double crochets into that one space, which is in that second double crochet. And again, take the hook out, put it in, insert it in the top of that first double crochet we made, pop it back on the hook and slip stitch it through. And then remember, because we want the top of this stitch to be the correct colour of the next stitch, which is a double crochet in the main colour, we chain 1 with our main colour and then double crochet into that next stitch. And all the while we're keeping the colour we're not working with on the top, so, and it doesn't show through the stitches, but it would show underneath here if you just picked it up again over here. So then we're working the corner, which is 2 double crochet, a chain 1 and 2 more double crochet. And then again, we've got our 3 stitches here, which need a double crochet in our main colour in the top of this one. Whoops. I yarned over and completed the stitch, but we know that we have to complete that with our popcorn stitch colour. So just yarn over and pull through, and then pop our popcorn stitch in that following stitch. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then to complete the popcorn stitch, pull up a loop, insert the hook in that first stitch, pop the loop back on the hook, and just slip stitch it through. Again, we need to chain 1, and we're going to do that in our main colour, chain 1, and put in our double crochet in this final stitch in the cluster. And then we're working our corner again. 1, 2, chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. Okay, and then for our last part of this, again, we need to double crochet into that first stitch and complete that stitch using our popcorn stitch colour. Now, of course, if you're not changing colour, then you don't need to worry about it. You can just go directly into your popcorn stitch. But you'll find that because we slip stitched across here in the beginning to get to this place to chain 3 for our first corner, you'll find that every round this last popcorn stitch and double crochet at the end here are quite challenging to get into because we slip stitched into this position here. But you'll get in, and it is doable. It's just that there's already a slip stitch in that stitch, so it's less simple, I guess, than every other time you've done this. And one last double crochet in that same stitch, complete that popcorn stitch, and do the chain 1 with our main colour, and do that last double crochet into the top of that final stitch, and slip stitch to the top of that initial chain 3. And that's our first part of, or our second round essentially, but our first round of popcorn stitches. You can see it's still a nice square shape, but of course we need to bring in a different colour. So I just cut that and leave myself a decent tail, because obviously I need to sew these ends in at the end of the square. So you need a decent tail, and again, all we're going to do is slip stitch across into that corner. I'm just grabbing my new colour, which is going to be the orange. So we've got our main colour still. It's the only yarn that's attached at the moment. All we need to do is slip stitch into that next stitch and slip into the corner, and we're in the correct position. Then we chain 3, of course, because our corner is 2 double crochets, or trebles if you're in the UK, a chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. And you can see now that just like here, there are 3 double crochets, and here on the other side of the popcorn stitch, there's the corner right there. There are 3 double crochets, and there will be every time you get to a new position or a new round, but it will increase. So what we do is we put in our first double crochet here in the top of that first stitch, but don't complete it, just bring in your new colour and pull that loop through so we've got the right colour to make our popcorn stitch. Don't worry if this loop's a little bit slack at the moment, you can tighten it when you finish your popcorn stitch. So we're putting in that popcorn stitch in the middle double crochet of this 3 and just putting in 4 double crochets to make that stitch, and then just pull on that to tighten that last one up. Take out the hook, put it into your first stitch, put the loop back on the hook if it wants to get on there, and slip stitch through. And then we're going to drop our colour and yarn over with our main colour. And then complete that final double crochet with our main colour. And when we get to the back of a popcorn stitch, because essentially what we need to do now is make 3 stitches, which will be the spaces between the popcorn stitches. So we've got 1 stitch there. Our next one is in the back of this popcorn stitch, and our final one will be in this first double crochet here, because of course our second double crochet gets a popcorn stitch. So what we do is just actually go into that chain 1, which you can see here. If I move these colours out of the way, that stitch there will be your place to create this next double crochet. So just lay your colour down so you can hide it, and just go in and crochet under your colour that you're hiding or carrying, and this chain 1, and that is how you do the stitch in the popcorn stitch. And then we're going to go into the top of this very next stitch and set up for our next popcorn. So that popcorn stitch goes into the second stitch in the 3. Two, 3, and 4. Then we need to take that hook out, pop it into the first stitch, loop back on the hook, slip stitch, and complete the popcorn stitch with a chain 1 in our main colour. And then we're putting in a double crochet immediately after it. So with the popcorn stitch, there is always a double crochet immediately before it, where you change colour to the popcorn stitch colour, and there's always a double crochet after it, where you have just chained 1 from the popcorn stitch. And then we're actually in our corner here. So we've got a stitch that we've just created after our popcorn, so we need to pop in the corner. 1, 2 double crochets followed by a chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. And of course we're carrying the yarn with us, and then we are going to double crochet into this stitch here, this first stitch here, but we're going to yarn over to complete this stitch with our popcorn stitch colour, and then make the popcorn stitch in this second stitch. Three and 4. Take the hook out, insert it under that first, pop the loop back on, and slip stitch. And we need to do the chain 1 in our main colour, and put in a double crochet in that final stitch right next to the popcorn stitch and right before the previous round's popcorn stitch. Then another double crochet under that chain one of the previous round's popcorn stitch. Stop coming with me. There you go. And into the top. That's my daughter in the background. Into the top of this first stitch here. Of course, we need to complete that stitch to create our next popcorn. And the popcorn stitch always goes in the center stitch of the 3 double crochets in the previous round. 3 and 4 stitches for a popcorn stitch. Oh, there's a very loud bird going past. And complete that popcorn stitch. And yarn over with our main colour. Then a double crochet in that final stitch in that group of 3. And we're back in the corner. So we need to put in 2 double crochets, a chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. And we move those across to get access to this first stitch. And yarn over to complete that stitch so we've got the right colour for our popcorn. And then pop him in that middle double. 2, 3, and 4. Complete the popcorn stitch. And chain 1 with our main colour. And then double crochet into the next 3 stitches. One of which is the back of this popcorn stitch, and the final stitch will be the setup for your next popcorn. And it really is as simple as that. So it works in 3s. Of course, I've already crocheted into this stitch. Now I'm putting the popcorn in this one. 2, 3, and 4. Complete that popcorn stitch, chain 1 with our main colour, and put in our final stitch before the corner, and then pop in the corner. 2, chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. And then again, scooch that over so we can get access to this first stitch. Set up for the popcorn. Popcorn into that second stitch. 2, 3, and 4. Complete the popcorn. Chain 1 with our main colour. and put in our final stitch in that group of 3 right next to the popcorn. So everything runs in groups of 3. When you're actually putting in a popcorn, you will always be putting it in your second stitch, and not including the corners, of course. So we've got corner, stitch, popcorn, stitch, which is the group of 3, but they actually work into the group of 3 below them. So now this stitch here is my setup for the popcorn. I need to yarn over in my popcorn colour and then put the popcorn in that middle stitch, which is a little bit tricky because it's one I've slip stitched into at the beginning. We're going to put in 4 double crochets. See what I mean about tricky? 4 double crochets, and then complete it by taking the hook out, popping it into that first stitch and slip stitching. And then we just yarn over in our main colour and complete our final stitch into this stitch here. Now it kind of almost looks like this chain 3 is coming out of that stitch, but it's not. It's coming out of the corner because remember we're slip stitching into the corners every time. So we do need to put in this final stitch in the top of that stitch there. And again, it's a tricky one because it's got a slip stitch in it, but you'll get in there and then you just need to slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. Now every round operates the same. I'll show you on this one here. You've got your groups of 3 in the beginning, and you can see when we make a corner, we put in 2 stitches. We put in 2 stitches in the corner, but actually then they join with that 3rd stitch that happens in before a popcorn and after a popcorn. So we've got our corner here, our 2 stitches, but then we put another stitch immediately in the top of that one of those stitches for the corner. So it happens the same every round. And now I just need to cut my orange off. Okay, so I have my next colour ready. It's the yellow for the rainbow, obviously. If you're not changing colour, then feel free to not. That's entirely up to you. Now we just need to slip stitch into this corner, again, as we do every round, and chain 3 to put in our first stitch of the corner, and put in our second double crochet, a chain 1, and 2 more double crochets. Now, as I was saying earlier with the 3 stitches, we have the 3 stitches here, 1, 2 and 3, for where we're going to place our next popcorn. But these 2 stitches for the corner are then going to create the 3 in that position for the next round. But we need to put in the 3rd, which is into the top of this double crochet here. But because we're about to place a popcorn, we need to yarn over in our popcorn colour. And just hang on to that tail. And it can be really tricky, but you can tighten this down once you've finished putting it in. So into that second stitch and a double crochet for the beginning of the popcorn. And just tighten that down and tighten that loop of your main colour, and then you're good to put in the other 3. 1, 2 and 3. Complete the popcorn. And once again, we'll be yarning over in our main colour. And it works repetitively like that. We put in 1 stitch into the following stitch after the popcorn. Our next stitch goes into that chain space, the chain 1 of the popcorn. And our next stitch in the 3 goes into the top of this stitch right next to the popcorn. And because we're setting up for a popcorn, we need to yarn over in our popcorn colour. So create that popcorn stitch, 2, 3 and 4. Complete the popcorn. And yarn over in our main colour. Now if you're wondering, I actually just have the 2 balls of yarn sitting beside me, and I check every time I grab the new yarn that I'm not tangling them sort of down next to me, because if I do tangle them, then it can be a bit of a pain. So yarning over and making this stitch right next to the popcorn, making the stitch in the chain space of the popcorn, and then the one that is right next to the popcorn where we yarn over to put in our next popcorn stitch. And then we're just about at a corner, but this is our last popcorn stitch for this side. 2, 3 and 4. Complete that popcorn and yarn over in our main colour. And put in the stitch right next to the popcorn stitch. 1, and then put in the corner, which is 2 double crochets, 2 double crochets, a chain 1 and 2 more double crochets. And then of course we need to put in our 3rd stitch right in this space here, into the top of that first of the group of 3 below, and yarning over in our popcorn stitch colour, and putting the popcorn stitch in the middle stitch of that group of 3, 3 and 4, and yarning over with our main colour. So it really is as simple as that. Essentially you just go through and put in the 3 stitches the same way every time. But that 3rd stitch, you need to do your completion of the stitch in the popcorn colour if you are changing colour for your popcorn. And make sure that your popcorn stitch always goes in the centre stitch in that group of 3. And then it'll be beautifully spaced in relation to the other popcorn stitches. So that's, oh no, there's one more stitch for this round. So we're just into the back of that previous round's popcorn and then set up for this next popcorn in that first stitch. Into the middle stitch. 1, 2, 3, and 4 in a second. 4. Complete the popcorn. Yarn over in our main colour. Put in our last stitch just before the corner, and then pop in the corner. It's 2 double crochet, a chain 1, and 2 more double crochet. Okay, so I'll let you finish this round. I'll meet you at the end of this round, and then for me there's only 3 more rounds after that, but they do get progressively bigger. Of course, we've put in 3 popcorn stitches in this round, but in the next round there's 4, and in the following round there's 5, and in the final round there's 6 popcorn stitches on each side. So but it follows the same pattern every time. You'll be putting in a stitch, and with that stitch on the second pull through 2, you need to change your colour. Put in the popcorn stitch, and on that chain 1 of the popcorn stitch, yarn over with your main colour. Then put in your final stitch in that group of 3. And do that until you get to your corner, where your corner is 2 double crochets and a chain 1. I'll see you at the end of this round. Okay, so I just have this final popcorn stitch to put in here in this round. And that goes into the middle stitch, which can be tricky to put it in because of that slip stitch that we did in the beginning. 3 and 4. Complete the popcorn. Yarn over with our main colour and pop in that last stitch right there in the top of that final stitch in this round. So and drop all your loops and then do it again. There we go. So all we need to do now is slip stitch to the top of that initial chain up 3, and that is that round there. So you can see that the process remains the same. You just end up putting in an additional popcorn stitch in the row because you've created the 3 stitches. So it's a fantastic pattern. What I'll do is meet you at the end of the square. I think you've got the gist of it now. Essentially, because of the pattern of 3, as I've said before, you put in a stitch immediately prior to your popcorn, that you yarn over with your popcorn colour. If you're not changing colour, of course, you just yarn over as normal. And then you put in your popcorn, and then you put in that stitch immediately after the popcorn, which goes into the stitch below it. And in the corner, you put in 2 double crochet and a chain 1, which makes actually the holes in the corners are really quite sufficient with the chain 1. You absolutely don't need the chain 2. So I'll meet you at the end of this square, and we can have a look at, because there's a number of ends if you're changing colours, and have a look at how to weave those in the most secure method possible, and then how to finish off the square. I mean, I'm sure you'll know how to do it, but I'll meet you at the end. All right, good luck with your square. So that is the square, and when you have a look, you'll probably notice that you've got a lot of tail ends to sew in. I'll just tie this off. And the easiest way to do that is, if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that I really like to secure ends in properly. Essentially, where you come out with a tail is around where you go in, but in a yarn strand beyond it. So, and I just go in under a few of those yarn strands all the way under, and then come back, not where you come out, but in the yarn strand in front, and then come out just beyond there. And I mean, there's no mathematical equation to it. You just grab a few of the yarn strands and pass it backwards and forwards. So that's easy with the center one. With these ones, things will be a little bit different with the colors. So generally you'll find that some of them are like this, that the color comes straight out from the color, and obviously you can just go around that. But some of them are like this one, and the color comes out from beyond your different color, your main color. So what I tend to do is just go in under there, grabbing the red or the same color stitches as I go. So it essentially passes it back under the red, and you won't see it, under the white rather, and you won't see it there anymore. And then the same thing applies, just passing it back and forth under some of those yarn strands to secure it, and then cutting it off. In my case, I'm actually making a cushion out of these squares. So what I am going to do, is do a half double crochet around, and then do probably a slip stitch join. I'll do a video of that particular join when I complete it, and also make the back of the cushion, the reverse of the cushion. And at this stage I'm thinking that it'll just be a very big solid granny square in the rainbow colors. So I do hope you use this technique. I'll finish up my ends, you don't have to watch that, but I do hope you use the square. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Remembering that you don't have to change colours if you don't want to. You can make it in a solid colour. Otherwise, you don't have to change colours as many times as I have either. Okie doke, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Have a great day.